Okay, we are recording for our first exam from Anderson in ethics. He says structure is 20 questions, 2 points. They're multiple choice, apparently. Seems kind of scary and weird with him. And then there are 2 sets of matching, which are 5 questions that contain match the thing, get a point. We're going over hedonism, eudaimonism, virtue ethics, and utilitarianism, both the act version and the rule version. Other concepts that he's going to try and squeeze in are normative versus descriptive subjects, nature and distinguishing features of morality, Aristotle's take on the virtues, Scruton on sex, and then he's going to end with Singer and the detail on Singer's argument for giving to the poor, which I found fucking ridiculous, but let's not get into that. Starting with the nature of morality, Anderson switches between the use of ethics and morality. For intents and purposes in this course, he considers them once and the same, and he'll use them interchangeably. When it comes to descriptive, this tries to define what the world is like. We can figure this out through observing science and what it's been like throughout history. Normative is what the world ought to be like. This is obviously when things get a little bit dicey. What happens when you cannot observe a thing? 6 propositions on the board. He brings up Coke versus Pepsi. That's subjective. LeBron versus Michael, things of that nature. He tries to introduce the concept of what is normative and why. There's a lot of disagreement in the moral world. There is a disagreement everywhere. If you feel the need to debate or argue, if you agree, that is an importance to argue. Ethics is normative. Morality is not the only normative subject. Fashion is a normative subject. Positive and negative terms, and who is the authority. So he gets into examples of what is health, what's the opposite of health, healthy, unhealthy, Mother Nature, etiquette, what's polite, what's impolite. This goes into culture, traditions, what is reverent or disruptive. Again, a cultural phenomena, education, learning versus not learning, the human psyche, law, what is legal or not legal, government. So he lays out some subjects which are normative. Morality, or what makes morality different, is the idea of right, wrong, good, evil, virtuous versus vicious or vice. Who's the authority in this realm? God or no one? He gets into the fundamentals of ethics, distinguishing features of the moral world, what is objective, what is the standard against which can be fallible and it can make mistakes. Dominant, what happens when morality conflicts with law? Do moral norms ever outweigh the law? Which right now is most of the time. Rational, right versus wrong. What is the reason? What happens when you reach the bottom of something? We really don't. We come to our moral beliefs by rationalizing something. Moral theory, what is right and wrong. The lead up is what is the value theory? What does it mean for humans to be happy? Hedonism is the breakdown of hedone, or the closest translation is pleasure. The only thing with intrinsic value is pleasure. This is the hedonistic perspective. The only thing with intrinsic disvalue is pain, then. Hedonism needn't be selfish. It could be societal or cultural. Intrinsic value, value that something has in and of itself. Instrumental value has value because it can bring something else about. Money versus ice cream, for example. Happiness is feeling a good vibe. So you can't eat money, but you can eat ice cream, which makes you happy. But if you don't have money to get the ice cream, are you really happy? Or is money the thing? He gets into that for a little while. Pros, simple, happiness is a good feeling. Different strokes for different folks. You can see how hedonism can get slippery very quickly. Can you remain a hedonist? Problems with being a hedonist. Hedonists will not tell you to be mindlessly stupid. Watch your child achieve something versus smoking a little grass. What makes you happier? The grass makes you feel good, while grinding out a soccer game with a bunch of toddlers might want to make you jump off a bridge. So what has more value? Here comes the Matrix question. Anderson's real life in the 90s. There were landlines. Grant and Susie and the fake conversation. So he brings up the Susie problem of her talking incessantly without listening to the other person and just waiting to talk. So it makes her feel good if she feels accepted into a group while talking. So him setting the phone down and not listening to her at all. Thought she had a very good friend that was into listening to her while he was just playing video games and pounding beers with his friends. So he did make her happy, and she felt happy. So was it wrong to do that? The hedonist answer would be yes. Both people's happiness was improved. He got to pound beers and play video games and didn't listen. She felt listened to, had a good friend. How should Susie feel if she finds out that it was a ruse? She would feel betrayed, having a friend versus the idea or feeling of having a good friend. What are universal values? Rival theories are eudaimonism to hedonism, a moral theory called virtue ethics. Hedonism, happiness is pleasure. If you think you're happy, you are happy. This is a subjective theory of happiness. The example of if someone says he's happy, are they happy? The individual theory, that gets problematic. Warren Jeffs, the cult leader, 13-year-olds getting married, were forced to marry, middle-aged men. Can you be mistaken about your own happiness? This is the objective theory of happiness. So he's trying to set the example of if the 13-year-olds thought they were happy and you took them out of those relationships and told them what was happening to them was abuse, would they still be happy? Like if they said they were happy, even if they were aware that that was probably an unusual family arrangement, but it brought them happiness to carry out their own religious traditions, and that's what made them happy. What business is it of it is everyone else. Eudaimonism, this is the Greek for you, good, daimon, soul, so good soul, well with my soul, or my soul is flourishing, eudaimonism. Aristotle, if you are thinking about human beings, maybe you should think about them as you would other things. Flourishing is related to function. What is the function of a human? The reason mind. What are things that define humans from animals? Aristotle says it's reasoning and its activities, the development of the eudaimon life, happiness as human flourishing. Aristotle qualifies these as virtues. Understanding versus wisdom, open-mindedness versus closed-mindedness, patience versus impatience, intelligence versus being a know-it-all, insensitive empathy to understanding, a bleeding heart, love, selfishness, courage. Aristotle says the opposite of virtue is vice. Anderson at this point brings up the virtue village. Aristotle puts vice as an excess or deficiency of being able to judge in between. Very important to parent your children well. Imitate exemplars of virtue. Virtue ethics is our first moral theory. Moral theory is virtue ethics. Identify what it means to be a good person and act like that person. Virtue ethics, if it equals right, what a good person would do. In favor of virtue ethics, benefits of built into the account of moral motivations, the payoff is being good and human flourishing. Objections. Who is virtuous? Who are the exemplars? What are the virtues? Limits in guiding action. Steal something to save your child. So the sick child, this comes up over and over again. Do you save the sick child? Do you save the drowning child? What would you do for the children? The priority problem. Start with what is the right action. Then you can figure out who is doing the right action. What happens when virtue ethicist goes wrong? So we get into Scruton on sexual morality. So Scruton, we talked about virtue ethics. Now we're going to talk about application of virtue ethics in the medium of sex. So now we're getting into the Scruton piece. Sex bot kinks. He gives the auditory examples of the robot. Objections to Scruton. Is eudaimonism right? Is this a plausible application of eudaimonism? What are going to transition into a utilitarian moral theory? So, unfortunately, I basically just completely skipped over Scruton. So hopefully that turns out to be obvious to me. We'll go over the Roger Scruton stuff, which I think that just rubs hedonism into everyone's face about sexual participation. Is it consensual? What do you get out of it? Scruton really came down to, are you loving yourself through another person? Are you going way, way overboard with wanking? Or are you trying to create a higher self in conjunction with another person through creating real intimacy? If I remember correctly, most of the Scruton stuff is going to be around that, which is probably why I skipped over it, because it's obvious. So here's moral action theory, the birth of utilitarianism. So this gets into Singer. The inventor apparently was John Stuart Mill, which makes a lot of sense. Jeremy Bentham, the creator of the Panopticon, was a utilitarian who said there's no such thing as human rights. Connecting morality and happiness. Is pleasure happiness? Is it eudaimonism? Utilitarianism roughly states the moral status of an act concerns its consequences. Does it make the world a better place or not? So that's the argument. Does an act of morality, a moral status, concerns the consequences? So act utilitarianism, an act is right if and only if it maximizes overall happiness. When you add up all societal sum of happiness, you are to maximize the number. What is happiness? Whose happiness counts? Utilitarians say all persons count, which is clearly a lie, because they enslave an indentured servant, whoever they want, and they count equally. A lot of these utilitarians can't even work out inequality or human happiness in their own societies. It is not the case that all persons are treated equally. Well, yeah. Pros. It's simple, intuitive, flexible. Slogan of utilitarianism: nothing is right or wrong intrinsically, save the consequences that make it so. Cons, objections, the measurements, calculations. Who does that? You can't predict events or outcomes. Weird shit happens. There are situations where it is impossible to predict. Sometimes even after the fact, it is impossible to predict. The no rest objection, when do you rest? Lowered bar utilitarianism, an act is right if it improves overall happiness. An act is wrong if it harms overall happiness. Once you lower the bar, you can be harmful through ignorance and complicity. That's kind of modern liberalism in the United States in a nutshell, basically entire Western order. Now we're going to get into Singer. How much do we have to give others? Singer says everything. The value theory is what we do value, what to maximize. The value theory is what do we value and what do we maximize. Eudaimonism, maximize flourishing. Hedonism, maximize happiness versus pleasure. Utilitarianism, maximize good results, maximize overall happiness through deeds. The justice objection. The Sherman example: Confederate soldiers were torturing Union soldiers at night. So Sherman killed a few Confederate soldiers and they stopped torturing. Rule utilitarianism, indirect utilitarianism. Follow the rule that is most beneficial. An act is right if and only if it conforms to rules, which, if followed, generally would improve overall happiness. Objections to act utilitarianism is the calculation. Who decides what acts are okay? The no rest. When do you stop? If your whole entire life is supposed to be contributing to the symptoms of injustice, and then justice. Go back to the Sherman rule. Rules utility response is just follow the right rules. This is the response to the calculation. No rest, get some rest on occasion. So this is lowered bar. Justice, don't shoot POWs. So this is saying don't stop letting your own soldiers get tortured because we want to be just. Don't frame innocent people. This is the sheriff example of, do you frame an innocent person to cause a riot or not? Don't rip people's organs out. So are you going to murder an innocent person because they have viable organs to save sick and dying people? So the problem with rule utilitarianism is the conflicts of the rules. And then we close out with the Singer stuff, which is spend every waking moment of your life doing the right thing and working your ass off to give all of your surplus to people in jeopardy while ignoring the cause of their infliction in the first place.